Even though Nuber had located a new weapon in the greatsword, he still was not satiated. He knew that entities among the likes of Omig Oolagar and the King's Buddy's protectors would be far too tough to be conquered with a mere greatsword. Having already rebirthed once, Nuber observed the exponential growth between weapons. He also realized that another rebirth was likely approaching, but he wanted to have the greatest advantage possible over all things at all times. So, Nuber commenced the search for a new weapon, preferably a sword. He wanted something larger than his current armament, and heftier. But Nuber knew that obtaining a powerful tool always takes more effort. He was prepared for this, as generally, getting a weapon is more persistence-heavy and less dangerous in nature. In Legas, certain weapons of great value gather around areas with a strong chaotic or non-chaotic essence. Nuber is not completely keen on this fact of the Legusian realms, but he pursues the right places for the same essential reason. Special things are generally found in special places. And, because of Nuber's freshness in the Empire of Legas, he can only really recall one instance of such energy, the Great Pine. But Nuber must get there first. The Great Pine is a large tree, the individual that brought Nuber to Legas in the first place because of the growing chaos. It is a source of large amounts of non-chaotic energy. The tree itself has been with Legas from the beginning, through all conflict. Because of its massive stature, Nuber quickly spotted the tree and began traveling to it. Once Nuber got to the Great Pine, he began searching the base of it for any evidence of woponic activity. He expected to find nothing around, and knew it was a long shot. With that in mind, Nuber began looking to the top of the Great Pine. At first, he was unable to see anything because of the bright sunlight penetrating his eyes. But as he looked higher and higher, he did see something, a crescent-shaped body. Nuber did not know what this body was, its importance, or its function, but he was determined to retrieve it from its perch. He was not desperate for a new weapon, but he did have time on his hands, and at the moment he saw nothing better to spend his time doing. Pursuing this lead could result in Nuber defeating his next opponent, like one of the King's Buddy's protectors. So with that confidence, Nuber began his noble ascent. Something should be known here. The size of the Great Pine can be visually deceiving. It is understood that it is much larger than it appears, not ridiculously so, but considerably so. The crescent-shaped body is approximately 30 feet up, to give perspective. Nuber uses the many girthy branches of the tree to pull himself up, and uses them again once he passes them as footholds. As he gets higher and higher, though, the branches shrink in diameter and become more unstable. Nuber must be aware of this to survive this expedition with the crescent-shaped body in hand. As he got closer, Nuber realized just what the thing he was fixated on actually was, a colossal curved greatsword, red in color. This relieved Nuber for two reasons. One, he knew he could throw the durable item and not have to cautiously carry it on the way down, and two, it was in fact a far superior weapon to his sword, or at least it seemed so. Now the only variable was getting to the weapon. All Nuber had to accomplish was to knock it off its branches and to safety onto the ground far below. The issue with that approach was the curved greatsword could fall incorrectly and strike Nuber, causing a major injury. This was especially if he lived up to its origin location, the Great Pine. But Nuber had done more difficult tasks before, and this was going to be worth it, at least in his mind. Once he had gotten within reach of the sword, he attempted to nudge it off its branches, using upward momentum. He was able to dislodge it, and when it hit the ground after its long fall, the sound and vibration were bassy and monumentous, as you heard. Nuber was reassured by this, as he knew at that moment that he had made a profound discovery. Now the challenge was getting down the Great Pine. He couldn't fall, so he had to be careful on the descent. All he had to do was retrace his successful path upwards to get downwards peacefully. Any slip would indicate imminent death, an embarrassing death, and a death of a life that could have been used to save the Empire of Legas in its entirety. But Nuber is generally skilled at surviving rough situations, so he was able to get off of the Great Pine completely intact. Once he did, he immediately... One fear that Nuber had collected during his brief interaction with the metal thing up in the tree was haunting him. Its weight. The curved sword weighed a massive amount, most likely over 30 pounds. To put that into perspective, Nuber's greatsword weighed about 3 pounds. This massive weight, even to an individual of the likes of Nuber, was just too much. Nuber knew at that moment that he could not feasibly use the thing as a weapon, but he wasn't going to let it go to waste. Nothing would stop him from having a little bit of fun. Even in the crumbling state of Ligus, enjoyment was still crucial for general well-being, as without it, Nuber would lose grasp of what was awaiting him at home. After that major workout, though, Nuber required a rest. All of the climbing took a massive toll on him, and carrying the new sword was already affecting him physically. Nuber, based on his travels so far, knew where to access some items to destroy with the red sword. The only issue now was actually carrying the hunk of iron, as it was massive in weight and size. Along with that, its handle and blade were awkwardly shaped, causing minor lacerations if held on the shoulder for too long. With this in mind, Nuber carefully transported the weapon across the Ligusian wilds and to its destination and testing ground.
The reason Nuber was so confidently maneuvering himself around Ligus without fear of an enemy approaching and exterminating him is that he was only in his second rebirth. As many know, Nuber underwent 2 rebirths, obviously meaning he lived out 3 lives. The first 2 iterations of Nuber were lesser targets than the third, as they had not matured into the major threat to Omig Oolagar, the Chaos Leader. At this point, it was suspected that Omig Oolagar may have not even known about the existence and therefore whereabouts of Nuber, because of the fact that Nuber had not yet killed any King's Buddy's protectors. Or, Omig Oolagar may have simply seen nothing in Nuber. But the Chaos Leader is generally a good teller of fortunes that come to fruition. But whatever the case, Nuber was safe traveling freely in the Empire. Once he was able to deposit the rusted sword, Nuber began traveling to a few other sites to retrieve items to use the sword on. The items in question were spread out throughout the local Ligusian regions, but there was still considerable space in between them. Nuber made one critical mistake prior to his departure, though. Because of the rush of excitement, he forgot to bring his greatsword with him. This made him a considerable target to those who happened to be passing by or who knew he was defenseless remotely. And Nuber did not realize this troubling truth until it was too late. Once he was far enough from both his standard greatsword and the curved Iron Rustsword, a foe saw an opportunity and attacked. It was not a protector, Omig Oolagar himself, but was created in the image of the Chaos Leader, like the aforementioned protectors. Sadly for Nuber, he could not tell the difference between all of the entities, meaning he had to play every move safe. He knew that even if it was just a minion of the Chaos, that it could still inflict major damage or even death upon him. So he quickly decided that he had to return to his greatsword to be able to engage in combat. Because of his distance relative to the weapon, he had to sprint. His enemy chose not to go full speed, as it was positively sure that Nuber was not fleeing, but returning to bring the fight to him, as you can see here. To this point, Nuber had never faced a true, worthy opponent. The only battle he had ever engaged in was with a no-name, generic, corrupted Ligusian, and that was no preparation for this fight. Nuber was vastly disadvantaged, not because of instrumentation, but because of skill. Omig Oolagar's fighters are well-trained individuals, comparable to the King's Buddy's protectors, which Nuber has again never faced in battle. The even more puzzling thing about the entire situation is the fact that Omig Oolagar was able to locate and pursue Nuber. There must have been some indication that Nuber was quickly gaining power that alerted Omig Oolagar of his presence in the Empire of Ligus, but nevertheless, Nuber was in major danger. Eventually, though, after persistence, Nuber was able to knock out the fighter, and, with one final blow straight into the skull, he put an end to its animation. Nuber was shaken up by the fight, as he was almost killed. He figured that it was not a King's Buddy's protector, and definitely not Omig Oolagar, so he thought he was almost ended by a basic chaos duelist. This realization was enough to make him doubt his abilities in combat, but the thought that really sent shivers down Nuber's vertebrae was that Omig Oolagar was now on his tracks. He was clearly watching his every move, and what was worse was that Nuber blamed himself for this development. He believed that his removal of one of the legendary weapons of Ligus alerted Omig Oolagar of a potential savior, causing him to send out an assassin to root out the problem before it grew. This would suggest a relationship between high and low chaos areas and the chaos leader, which would in turn allow him to remotely locate individuals if they were present in those places. But there was nothing that Nuber could do at the current moment to alleviate this concern. He simply had to live with it. Nonetheless, he decided to give himself therapy in the form of violent destruction with the curved Iron Rustsword. He made the trek back to the site where he had left his weapons and planned on using the rusted sword. After depositing his greatsword, he searched the area for the things he wanted to destroy. Nuber had obtained a melon-like fruit, a piece of scrap wood, and a large, durable stone. These items were good testing material as they simulated the armor of different clans of soldiers. The melon was great at simulating bare flesh. Once all items were in position, Nuber retrieved the curved Iron Rustsword to annihilate some matter. Nuber had always liked destroying things, and really became hooked in Legus. It was good sword accuracy training, and helped him feel powerful. As you can see, Nuber has little respect for his less than adequate greatsword at the moment. He began with the scrap wood, as he knew it would be the least impressive. He had to sit it up on another log for best results, though. Once the heavy rod came down with all of its kinetic energy, the wood easily broke in half, like a stick on the knee of a bulky man. Then, he moved on to the melon, which he expected to be spectacular, but not difficult for the weapon. It was a tomato-like entity, a bright red globe of life that symbolized the Gilded Age of Legus. Despite this, it was a fragile spheroid that was bound to die. Nuber's first was inaccurate, knocking the body off the support pole. Nuber shamefully picked the thing back up for a retry. Once he struck, it ruptured like a stomach full of water into many pieces. Some melon even contacted him, and he was not opposed to that, seeing in his self-licking. Finally, Nuber moved on to the challenging to crack rock. He made sure to use extra power and leverage in the swing of his rusty sword to give it the best possible chance of breaking through the tough rock. If it could shatter stone, it was legendary. Contact, Nuber's hands were immediately struck with pain, but the sword's weight simply crushed that out pit, breaking it in half. This gave Nuber great satisfaction, even though he knew he had to part with the legend of a weapon. He confirmed that this empire called Legus is home to powerful things and has a deep, loreful history that is worth investigating. Nuber also recognized that the battle with the assassin improved his physical skills, and therefore appreciated his curiosity in looking for a new lead, despite the danger. This article he ended up finding didn't directly help him, as he obviously couldn't even use it, but it led him to a useful encounter. What Nuber didn't yet have the mental capacity to comprehend was that Omig Oolagar may have just tested him, not attempted to kill him. He wanted to send out an expendable scout to see if he was actually a threat, and by surviving that plot, Nuber proved his danger on the battlefield. He was the first prospect of a savior for the Empire of Legus, and therefore just subjected himself to the wrath of every supernatural, chaotic, and godlike being in the vast empire. Nuber was not going to be safe. Instead, he was everything but from this point on. He wasn't still dealing with mundane creatures. He was dealing with literal lords. Despite the profound nature of what Nuber had just done, he still almost failed to learn his lesson. Always carry a weapon with you.